Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nanda Summit. We're hosting on Tuesday, May 13th. Nanda stands for, a network of AI agents with decentralized architecture. And today, our focus is going to be on the trust layer, about the foundations such as authentication, registries, as well as reputation, know your agent, KYA, and so on. We have a very packed program today. We'll have the CTO of Dell, John Roese here. Then we'll have Todd Siegel from A2A at Google. Soon after that, we'll see some amazing technology that's being put out by Project Nanda that uses combination of A2A and MCP towards really the goal of creating a agent-to-agent internet out there. We'll talk some other collaborations we're having with many companies, including Dell and HP and HCL and TCS and Akamai and so on, about how we can create these foundational technologies. We'll have three panels on investability in this notion of decentralized internet of AIs, how we can build trust, and we'll have several startups also show their prototypes and how they're working on Nanda-like protocol. With that, let me invite John Roese, the CTO of Dell. Welcome, John.
Great to be here.
John, now you and I have been talking about this for more than a year, about how, as technologies move to the edge, from mainframes to edge devices, the way we think about centralized AI is going to change. Share us a little bit about, from your vantage point, how you see this transition taking place and how that will play a role in the internet of AI agents.
Yeah, we have been kind of unambiguous for, I don't know, I personally have been saying this for 15 years since the cloud era started, that the operating model of cloud was an operating model, not a place, and that the end state would definitely be a distributed system, that you cannot possibly believe that all data in the world is going to be in one place and only exist there, or all users. And so logically, infrastructure should follow. So now as we enter the AI era, it's interesting because the first phase of generative AI, the last couple of years, has largely been fairly centralized AI systems, whether they were API services that were delivered by providers or even within an enterprise, a centralized chatbot or a tool. And maybe that got people complacent to think that maybe this was all going to be centralized. And the reality is then we started to realize that AI models, AI systems absolutely are not captive to a particular place. They can move around. And agentic frameworks are kind of the first real path for us to really move the full potential of an AI system to wherever the data or the users are. Now the challenge is, well, we know that's possible. We built them. We built our first autonomous agents over a year ago, and they very much were not in one single place. They moved around, they tracked with the users, they followed the data, but we still have a lot of work to do. We have, we have to basically, just like the early internet, make a system that is trustworthy, that is predictable, that has resiliency. And so, haven't done this for a very long time. We're repeating a lot of the adventures we went on to make other technologies scalable and deployable at a global scale. And so while the problems are not new, the way we have to go solve them, the approaches, and definitely the use case is significantly more advanced than anything we've ever seen.
That's fascinating. Kind of history repeats itself in so many ways. And if you think about how different ecosystems have emerged, I think the web ecosystem emerged in a very natural and organic way, and that has created, a wonderful kind of a garden of many flowers, as opposed to how it may have emerged in the mobile phone ecosystem, where the garden has been very walled. How do you see this current evolution emerging? I know there are a lot of well-intentioned players that are coming in and providing interoperable technologies, including our team at MIT. How do you see this playing out? And I just want to be careful about using the word interoperability. That sounds like a very simple issue. In reality, it's the whole ecosystem that you have to build around these highly open systems.
Yeah, let's be clear. When you're talking about agentic, you're talking about two possible scenarios. One scenario is that you actually have a distributed set of digital skills living and instantiated as AI agents, autonomous agents, working as a single ensemble to accomplish work. You have different skills combined. Now, if that's within a single domain, within a single enterprise, it's a little easier. But the reality is most processes that you apply AI to are actually distributed across organizations. We have dependencies to our suppliers, our supply chains, our customers. And so fundamentally, we know that scenario requires some degree of interoperability, architecture that allows compatibility and cooperation. A simpler use case, which is actually kind of the early A to A use cases, are more of agents as an API, that you don't have a single ensemble, you have many ensembles that all do work, and then you need to have them talk to each other. And there's an argument that could be made that we could do that with conventional APIs. We could literally just put a particular RESTful interface in between there and just transact data or, queries between them. But boy, that would really minimize the functionality of an agent, because if you have used autonomous agents as an interface, an API, you discover that they are way more advanced than any API we've ever dealt with. They can interact with each other, they can ask questions, they can clarify, they actually can reason, even if they're not in the same domain. And so, we know that they're in both of those two scenarios, which are really the only two scenarios for agents, there is this dependency on interworking. Now, the problem is, to your point, what is interoperability? What is interworking? And our view is that there are three layers. The first layer is that you must have the ability to instantiate agents on infrastructure in a way that is standardized and reusable. And the good news there is we kind of have that worked out. You can spin up a Kubernetes cluster and you can use containers to host the agentic frameworks and the functions. You can find other ways to embed them in devices, on X, WebN, on PCs. There's different tools that are absolutely going to be out there. I'm not worried about that one. We know how to make interoperable software across the internet work. The second layer is you need interworking protocols. These things talk to each other. They don't talk through something else. They like to talk to each other. And there might be some gateways and proxies that exert security control, but generally you want agents interacting with each other to actually achieve an agentic behavior. Those are where A to A and to some extent MCP live. But the reality is there's a third layer. And the third layer is, even if they can talk to each other, what do they talk about? What guides them? And that's the orchestration layer that has to be interoperable. And there's two approaches. One, you build one big centralized monolithic orchestration layer, or two, you build more of a distributed orchestration layer, a thing that allows the systems to find each other, to trust each other, to keep state, to do telemetry. And we have a long history in the industry of building both. Eventually, the one that always wins is the distributed architecture, DNS one, as opposed to host files on workstations. And we're going to see that same pattern. But I think you have to solve for all three of those. Platform interoperability, I think we're heading in the right direction. We'll get there. Agentic interworking protocols, a bit of debate and lots of dialogue, but good progress. People are converging on things like OTel and various ways to present messages. And then orchestration, that's really where the hard problems are. And that's where a lot of the Nanda work is. And that's where we're thinking about, how does this system behave as a system? Registries, finding, searching, understanding, those are harder problems. If we don't solve all three of them, we won't have that outcome that we're looking for. But we've solved all three of them in other domains, and now we ought to go solve it for agents.
So you're hopeful, but also concerned at this stage.
Well, let me give you a tangible thing. I did every year, CTOs, at the end of the year, we publish our predictions for the next year. And last December, I published my predictions. And one of them was, I said, agentic would be the word of the year in 2025. And when I said that, I had to do all these media interviews around the world and every geography. And I talked to all the analyst communities. And 9 out of 10 times, I had to explain what an agent was. That was December. Now, in January, I met with some of our biggest ISV partners, our biggest software suppliers of Dell, because I'm the chief AI officer also, so I have to make this work inside of the company. And everybody was talking about agents, and I challenged them. I said, this is great. You have an agent inside a company X, an agent inside a company Y. I use both of you. Can you talk to each other? And nobody could answer it. There was no good answer. This is in January, February. So we asked them to come together and talk, and other people did that. You did that. A bunch of us kind of acted as conveners to get people talking to each other. We had our meeting 2 weeks ago in California with a lot of those same players. And by the end of the meeting, we had largely converged around OTel. We had converged around the fact that, A to A, agency, and MCP are not orthogonal to each other. They're complementary. We can put these things together into a set of interworking protocols. And then obviously stuff you and I have been talking about is making progress and bringing us another layer. So yeah, I'm still waiting for the actual answer to fully materialize. But look, the speed in which this has progressed from nothing to basically the ecosystem coming together and working. The fact that this event is happening, that people are talking to each other is huge progress. And the fact that we're actually coalescing around de facto standards. We're coalescing around ways to solve these problems. That makes me very optimistic. In fact, I told my boss that I don't think in the first half of the year we will have autonomous agents that are fully interoperable across domains in a way that we can really use to their full potential. But I did say by the second half of the year, I think we will get there in some domains. I think we will have that, even if we still have other work to do. And given a 3-month timeline and we've made this much progress, I think unless we just stop and all go home, we're gonna do just fine. We're gonna get there.
That is fascinating. I love your enthusiasm here and your optimism.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about how you think about the registry aspect of it. Because as you just said, very rightly, you predicted that although it's going to be an agentic year, the fact that we still cannot get, I mean, there are many other sectors. I mean, if you remember AOL and CompuServe, even today, we cannot use messages across social media. Apps cannot talk to each other from iOS to Android. So some of these, amazing systems haven't really played out despite good intentions. So, and also, how do you see the role of enterprise agents versus, let's call it, kind of consumer agents? Consumer could also include small and medium businesses.
Yeah, two questions. But the first one, look, I'm thinking about my career. I was involved in most of those poorly interworked experiences, going all the way back to networking standards like token ring versus Ethernet, and we had always this lack of interoperability. Hopefully we've learned our lessons and we are doing it better this time around. And maybe the speed in which we're moving and the fact that we're coalescing as an industry around wanting to work together, we will start with something common, as opposed to what happened with the difference between SMS, MMS, the iMessage versus some of the IMS services in the telecom messaging space. We're like 15 years later, we're finally able to interoperate on a messaging layer between Google and Apple ecosystems. It's like, that's mind-boggling. But if you understand how those were built and why they were built, the intention was never to interoperate. It wasn't the priority. And so my hope, but I think people like us can all help steer this, is let's not fragment and then put it back together. Let's start with something that assumes a level of interoperability. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to implement it the same way. It doesn't mean there isn't room for some proprietary value add. It's just the base level of interoperability. If we get that right, we will save ourselves a decade of cleaning up the mess we make. So please, let's be really serious about that. In fact, in the meeting we had a few weeks ago, it was kind of encouraging. People were saying, this kind of looks like the session initiation protocol experience when we're talking about, invoking engagement between agents. I'm like, good. That one actually worked once we figured it out. We learned a whole bunch of things about proxies and addressing schemes. Let's not repeat those mistakes. So I think we're in good shape there. The enterprise problem is bigger, though. So here, let me be very blunt. If any of you are coming at this purely from a consumer or a SaaS provider that isn't really an enterprise, I am the chief AI officer of a $100 billion enterprise. I live in a world where I am extremely scrutinized. I have regulatory burdens on me. I have financial responsibilities. I'm a board of director. We are a publicly traded stock. All of those things mean I do not joke around with technology. And so when we look at something like agents, while I think they are incredibly powerful and incredibly valuable, two things we think people are going to have to be sensitive to. The first is our data matters to us. If you come to me and say, I have this fantastic agentic solution, all you have to do is move your data to me, to some other third party that I don't even know, it's never going to happen if it's data that is confidential, regulated, or in other words, sensitive. It's just not going to happen. So understand the data ecosystem underneath this is as or more important than the agents themselves when we start talking about an enterprise. And so if you're not cognizant of how enterprise data works, I've talked to SaaS players that literally thought that because an enterprise used a public cloud, that they had made their data public. That's not true. That data, even in the public cloud, is encrypted with their keys. It's not, no one else can see it. It's not public data. In fact, here's a statistic. inside of Dell, we have more data inside of our company than the combined data sets used to train every foundation model that has ever been created in the world. I think that number still holds. It's getting bigger, but hundreds of petabytes of data, and we are not willing to give that up or share it. And so if you want to play in the enterprise, you have to work on the enterprise's terms about their data, their confidentiality, their regulatory responsibility. That's number one. Number two is, I use this phrase, we do a lot of agent development internally because we're working on bringing this into our processes carefully. It turns out that when you actually go after something that's meaty and meaningful in an enterprise, be very careful about how much autonomy you give the agents, because we all know I've built agents that have a high degree of autonomy and they're a little flaky sometimes. They operate in weird ways, but that's okay because they're supposed to. They're highly autonomous. It turns out almost every enterprise implementation of agentic to date that I've seen or done has what I call big training wheels on it. That you take this agentic framework and then you put guardrails around it and constrain it to or either work with a knowledge graph that's very specific on the data that I trust, or it has certain constraints around what it can actually do, or the job prompt is incredibly specific. And I appreciate that is not as sexy and as exciting as an unfettered agent trying to be AGI, but enterprises will not start there. They will start with a highly constrained set of agentic workflows. They will get comfortable with them. And then if the guardrails are done properly, you will relax the constraints and add more autonomy, more reasoning, more interaction to those agents over time. So don't, even if you have something that you think can solve world hunger and do AGI, there is no enterprise in the world that would ever put that into production today. You'll have to start at the other end. The technology is the same. It's just how many guardrails, how many constraints, what data you provide is important. The good news, though, is every enterprise CIO and chief AI officer I've talked to that understands agentic is excited about it because it allows us to do something we haven't done before. To date, all we've been able to do is unlock proprietary data and present it as generative experiences. With agents, we have the ability to digitize skills. We have the ability to shift work fully into the machine layer, and that is a tool we did not have until recently. That is a profound productivity driver for the enterprises of the world. But advice to you, if you're not an enterprise person, you want to sell to an enterprise, go hire an enterprise person and understand all the crazy constraints that exist in the enterprise world. They're all navigable, and there are very progressive enterprises that are willing to do very advanced work. But at the end of the day, the data is the company in many cases. And the risk of adopting technology that is not controllable is too high. So we have to put some level of controls around agentic solutions to make sure that they operate within the trust boundaries that we're comfortable with. And over time, we can relax those constraints, not start with the Wild West.
That's fascinating. I mean, a couple of things you said, I just want to make sure everybody heard. One is Dell as a company has more data than all the foundation models have been able to use. And second is the way enterprises are going to use agentic frameworks will be very, very cautious, very, very careful. And that roadmap is still unclear. I mean, if I look at your founders, Michael Dell, he was one of the visionaries to think about how to switch away from mainframes to PCs, and that changed the game. A lot of listeners already are here, and a lot of them are thinking about, what should their research be? What should their ventures be? What should their startups be? I already see many of the investors are on the call as well. How should they be thinking about this revolution, kind of the business and R&D ecosystem?
Yeah, it's not incremental. I mean, that's the punchline. Michael didn't build a better mainframe. He said, hey, this distributed compute thing, this idea of personal computing made sense. By the way, we've done that several times. We pivoted into multi-cloud and hybrid cloud. He acquired EMC, and when everybody else was breaking their companies up into small things, he said, no, scale matters. This is an end-to-end problem. So he's reasonably insightful. But in every one of those scenarios, that's my point is, every time that happened, there was a path that was easy, which was the incremental path. And then there was an obvious disruption that you just had to lean into. And even as a big company, when you lean into those big disruptions and you do it intelligently and you get in front of it, that's where the big payoffs come. And, we're 41 years as a company. Michael's led the company the entire time. Think about all the inflections we've navigated through. We didn't navigate them because we sat passively on the sidelines hoping it didn't affect us. We acknowledged it was going to affect us. We leaned in hard and we basically said, let's get to the other side quickly. Let's get there as fast as possible. In fact, as a company today, we are re-engineering every part of our company for the AI cycle. We know that this is not an option. We cannot sit on the sidelines. We cannot outsource this to someone else. I am the chief AI officer. I'm also the CTO. We have AI engineering. My partner in crime, our CIO, is on the journey with me, and we are investing heavily. We are seeing material results. We are actually being very structured and disciplined about it. And the result is, our goal is we're not competing with somebody else. We're competing for this inevitability that our industry gets turned on its head by the AI advancements that we see coming. Supply chains will be better. Sales forces will be more intelligent. Software development will profoundly change over the next several years. You think about all of those inflections. If you're a company that has those things and you do nothing, you're going to have this done to you. And so my advice to people, and I've witnessed it firsthand, Michael is a great example of this, is when the inflection comes and it's clear, don't wait, go, change your strategy. We have a philosophy in Dell. We have a lot of, kind of taglines inside of the company. One, Michael uses the phrase, pleased but never satisfied. So we never are complacent. And then the second one is that we are data driven. We make decisions based on data. And if the data changes, we change our decisions. The data changed 3 years ago. The assumptions about AI changed. The data is changing right now around agents. We know this is different. We know that this is going to have a different outcome. If you don't change your behavior, you're in trouble. So anyway, lots to learn there, but I don't think anybody on this event is like an AI agent skeptic, but we have a lot of people that are still figuring this out.
So final question, John. And as you know, the Nanda community is massive. 15 different universities are working with us. Many startups, many corporates who are launching their demonstrations with us, including your company. There are many researchers that are writing papers. What can you say to inspire them? Like, what is this moment? Is this more like the W3C moment? Is there something that you can describe and inspire this group?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think W3C is a great analogy because it kind of gave structure to the web. It gave us a path forward, but I think it's bigger than that. I mean, people ask me how big is the AI cycle and the agentic cycle, and it's bigger than any I've ever seen and faster. So the two things that are really interesting right now, one, this is a profound change, and if you're involved in it, the opportunity to kind of reinvent the world, not just the technology, is actually the opportunity, or productivity, how work is done. And the second opportunity, though, is I've been through a bunch of these cycles. This is going to happen in the span of maybe a year or two, where every other cycle took a decade or more. So how do we, imagine being that you have a front row seat to the fastest moving inflection that will impact the world in the biggest way possible, changing the definition of work and how it's distributed. I don't know. I think that's pretty exciting. But my ask is, again, if you're an old timer like we are and you've seen this play out before, there are lots of casualties from the past where people got it wrong and had to fix their mistakes. If we can move fast and do it right, we won't have to clean up the mess. We won't have to invent interworking a decade from now. We'll start with an interoperable framework. So this community is incredibly important because, by the way, the other pattern, every one of those big inflections that happened, the advent of 4G and 5G, I was involved in those, the advent of the internet, the advent of the web ecosystem, the PaaS ecosystem, every one of those, if you look at the composition of the people who did it, it was not 3 smart people in one company in a room. It was an open ecosystem that included academia, it included various parts of business, it included companies working together, it even included governments. And when you get them all kind of aligned, that's where you get to the outcome. The challenge here is, can we do all of that and get to that outcome in like a year or two, which normally we had a few decades. That's going to be our biggest challenge, but I think it's going to be very exciting. And so far, the evidence says we can move a lot faster than maybe we thought we could. So we're very excited about it. Couldn't tell. By the way, my Twitter handle, if you didn't know, from 2006 is the ICT optimist. It's been that. So I am very optimistic about technology as just a matter of practice.
Fantastic. On that note, optimistic note, John, thank you so much for sharing your insights about how we're going to build this network of AI agents in a decentralized architecture. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Excellent.